Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of the Solo Experience. I'm your host, Ryan, and today we're going to talk about things that I need to get rid of. There's not a ton of them, but it is things that need to find a home. So if you are in the need of some of this stuff, today may be the stream for you. And of course, at the end of this, we'll be taking questions, so that's not an issue. If you got questions, drop them in the chat. We can get to them, and I'll probably sprinkle them in as they come up. But just wanted to give you guys a heads up what this stream is going to be about. It's going to be stuff that Ryan needs to move. And the stuff that I need to move is the following. Let's take a look. There we go. Sorry, I was also getting some shoes. There was a Nike drop of some OG Shocks that came up. So I got those. I don't know if you guys can see them. They're purple. And I was like, I need those. And my mom gave me a Nike gift card a while ago. I'm like, that's them. That's what we're getting. So I got those. So I'm excited about that. Anyway, so this is stuff that needs to find a home. The Ascendo 10s are gone. I've got a Sony AZ3000 that's actually finding a home today. So that's leaving. Funnily enough, that one, so I took a job. I'm going to give you some insight into the life of Ryan and how, little things like this can get in the way. So I've got a job. It's a local job, and it is a pretty simple install. The guy wanted to move from a sound bar to a traditional center speaker with two side channels, so a traditional LCR, and then he wanted to add two rear surrounds. He had a passive sound bar. He wanted not a passive sound bar. I told him, I don't know that that's a good idea, but it's what he wanted to do. So we put in a traditional center. The sound bar was on a mount that hung from the TV. He's got a mantle mount, so it comes down. And put that on there. And then he had two existing speakers that we use for LCRs. So they're all the same brand. And then he had two rear speakers that we added and installed, but we had to run the cable. Well, he also wanted distributed audio. And typically how I do distributed audio is I will use Blue Sound. And to move from this sound bar, which he didn't really have working, he was just using the TV because it was a new home. Use the soundbar, he needed an AVR because we needed a 5.1 AVR to be able to drive all these speakers. And then he was adding a sub. Well, we didn't know if we were going to be able to do the sub because the sub where he wanted it, we'd have to go through the basement. The basement was finished. We could go through the attic, but what we found in the attic is the drop down in the wall wasn't conducive for this, and it would have been a lot more labor to make it happen. So what I told him was, we'll do wireless for this. We're using a SVS wireless adapter. We can make do with the latency. Not a problem. Not the best solution, but it is good enough in this situation. And the mistake I made, not related to that, was we did I think it was a Denon S570. And I sold him a hub because he wanted to take the audio from the TV and pump it in his distributed audio system. And you need a hub to be able to do that. So the hub, we need pre-outs. Well, I don't typically do installs like this with S570s and things like that. And I had forgotten that you don't get pre-outs until the 1800X. So I installed the S570 and I'm like, yeah, this will work. And then while I'm sitting at home, you kind of have those epiphany moments. This was not a great epiphany moment. And I realized, crap, does that thing even have pre-outs? It did not. So he is getting an upgrade. It was my mistake. So I'm not going to go back and say, well, I sold you this. You actually need this, because I wouldn't want that. And I try and take my customers and treat them how I would want to be treated. And I'm not going to get something and think everything's going to work and then them say, well, this isn't actually going to work. You need this. That's not okay. So I kind of have to fall on my sword. At least that's how I feel. Maybe it's a bad business decision. I don't know. But he's getting this Sony AZ3000 that I have, and it will work. It's a much better AVR. It's not going to be any sound different, but it's more capable. He's going to be able to grow with it. He gets it because I screwed up. So he gets that. So good for him. So we'll do that. So that's not going to be available, but I have I think 2 more LS12,000s. The brand new in box, ready to ship. So if you have a need for that, we don't discuss out the door pricing here, but you can send me a message, either using the QR code in the top left corner. You can text me if you've got my phone number, shoot me an email if you've got any of that. And then we have some Storm units that I've had since Cedia, and they need to find homes. So the Storm units, they are expensive, but they represent the end of the line. So there's certain devices that I look at as, if you get it in your system, that there's nowhere really else to go, that is the end. And the Storm, the Fusion, the Elite 32, the Elite 16, the Core to some extent, depending on what you're trying to do, all of those represent that. And Trinov does too, as well. Ascendo is one of those. Projectors can be those, though. Anything that's geared on technology, AVRs and preamps are kind of the exception to this. Anything that's geared on technology, specifically displays, there's really no end game, because technology has a tendency to move rather quickly or faster on displays, and things change and capabilities change, and you're going to want to change eventually. And so I can't say that any type of projectors really end the end of the line, because it will change eventually. But Storm and Trinov, for how they've geared their stuff and the upgradability that they provide, I don't really see that as needing to change the chassis. So they're one of those devices that, I think if you're in need of one or considering one, this is a great opportunity to get into one, because they are open box from Cedia. So they are discounted. So if you have a need for one, again, QR code, you got my phone number, you got my email, reach out and we'll get you taken care of. I'm not going to focus on this sales stuff too much, because there's not a ton of stuff. Obviously, I do have access to other things. If you need stuff, we're not going to make this stream all about that, even though it is the title. So we'll look at this real quick. These are all the brands that Ascend represents. So it's not just about those products. If you guys need something else, this is definitely something to look at to see if the brand is represented there. I think I've got most of the stuff in this list. So if there is something that you need, do take a look at ascendav.net/partners and see if the brand you're needing is there, and we can try and get you taken care of. But enough about that, because you guys don't want to hear the self-servicing and all that stuff, because it's not fun. It just sounds like a sales pitch, and I don't like sales pitches. We're not going to make it all about sales pitches anymore. I know that's the title of the video, but I don't want to talk about it. We got a little bit to talk about. 20 or 30 minutes left before I've got to go and help that guy out that's getting the AZ3000. And I think I'm going to beat this into the ground, but I want to talk about it again. I think it's important to reiterate how important it is to pick equipment based on the needs of the room, based on the needs of the overall experience. I cannot overstate this. It is not possible for me to overstate this. But I also want to put a not a qualifier, but a addendum in here, if you will. And the addendum is, there are very few bad speakers out there. There are speakers that are used improperly, is what I will say. There are speakers that are used that don't meet your subjective need. You're listening, like your frequency response and that kind of stuff. There are becoming fewer and fewer and fewer bad speakers, bad electronics, there's fewer and fewer and fewer. The key is to use things within their limitations and to not push things to their absolute limit. You want things, in my opinion, to be on cruise, just cruising along, not at the ragged edge. Pushing to the ragged edge is where things, you're going to encounter distortion, you're going to encounter clipping, you're going to encounter limits. You don't want to encounter limits. You want things to be easy, right? In life, you want life to be easy, though we do learn from encountering our limits and we do grow. Equipment does not grow. It is not like a person. It's not able to necessarily learn. I mean, some cases there are, but you don't want to be pushing things to the absolute ragged edge. It's not where you want to be. You want to be cruising, in my opinion. So it's really important to utilize things within the limits of their capacity and to not just buy based on a frequency response is an example from a speaker, right? If you only look at a frequency response, even if it's from a Clipple, right? A spinorama, even if it's from that, that does not paint enough of the picture for you to be able to make an objective decision about whether or not that is correct for you. You really need to look at the 2010B data. You need to look at the sound power, the dispersion. You need to look at off axis. You need to look at compression. You need to look at impedance load. You need to look at everything. And I also think it's really important to understand how to read the spinorama. So eventually on the AVS podcast, we're going to do a video about how to read the spinorama data, because I think that's really important. And very few people actually know how to read all of the information. They can read a frequency response and they can say, oh, this is fine, but they don't know how to go any further than that. And it's really important to not base your entire purchasing decision or your entire point of that time of your journey, if you will, on that one piece of data. That is a recipe for a bad time, or not necessarily a bad time, but leaving a lot on the table. And that's not where I want people to be. So it's very, very important that, in my opinion, and people may disagree, people will disagree, absolutely, that you get equipment that is going to deliver what you want. A prime example of this is, and I'm going to bring up the Mad VR Experience Center because it's right here, is from the outset, I decided I want to show what is possible. What is the end? What is the bottom of the rabbit hole, right? Performance-wise. So that was the finish line. That is where I knew I needed to get. So I had to make decisions on how I was going to get there. And the first decision I had to make was, what was the room going to be like? Right? I got to design the room. I was going to involve Officina Acustica. I had a limitation as far as length, width, and height that I could work within. And we decided, well, if we do this with Officina and we eat up this amount of space, I actually need to move this wall back in order to gain enough room around the couch to walk around it, right? So that was me working within the space. And then I had to make a compromise being the intrusion of construction into the space, because we had to tear down a wall, build a new wall, in order to gain that extra 1.5 feet of room. It didn't exist in that room before. It was 14.5 feet wide. We made it 16 feet wide in order to accommodate the room within a room premise of Officina Acustica, and then have enough room to move around the couch, right? That had to happen. And if I would have picked equipment and all of this stuff beforehand, before addressing the room, right, that may have not have been possible. And I'll tell you why. Because I was actually, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, man, I could do huge speakers. Like, even the example of this is Ascendo 15s. The Ascendo 15s are enormous. The 12s are big. The 15s are gigantic. And they would not have worked in that space. And if I would have bought them before I had done that, before I had figured out these limitations of the room and pieced equipment that fit into these limitations and needs and use cases, I would have had a bad time. So it is fundamental, imperative that you start at the foundation, literally, of the room. You start at the foundation, the bare bones, and you build from there. And you make determinations, decisions, and decide on pathways based on what you have available. If you choose equipment ahead of time, before you have those decisions made, those are the times where you're going to buy something, and then you're going to realize that either A, it's not going to work in the room, or B, the decision you thought, or the pathway you thought you were going to take, is not the correct one, and it changes. So now you have to sell or buy again or eat both of those purchases. And that's not the thing you want to do. It's a waste of money. And the thing that you may have gotten, if you can't rebuy it and sell it, it may not be ideal for your use case any longer because something may have changed. So it's very important that you nail down what the room will be like. And even before you get to the foundation of designing the room, it's deciding what the use case of the room is. Is this a multi-use space? Is this a theater? Is this a living room? Is this a bedroom? And then design from there for the use, not around the equipment and making the equipment work. You design the room, not really thinking about the equipment yet, to meet whatever expectation you have. Then once you've decided on the use, the experience, and all of that, then after you have it laid out, after you figured out, all right, the walls are going to be like this, I'm going to have this much room to work with, the ceiling's going to be this height, the projector, I have this much room to work within, you're able to determine what equipment I can utilize, what will even fit. And before I go on, I just had a customer email me. It was my gentleman. What equipment will fit? What equipment will work? But most importantly, what equipment enhances or gets you to that experience? Again, back to the Mad VR Experience Center. I wanted to showcase what the end was. And of course, there are multiple brands that allow you to do this. Ascendo is not the only one. I cannot just say that they're the only one because they're not. But I had heard the Black Swans and I had heard the then 50, now the 64 at, you guys have heard this story at Atlanta Home Theater. So I had a relationship with that equipment. And I knew that I really liked it. And I knew that that was what I needed to make work. So I knew if I had the space, that's what was going to happen. Right. So when we were designing the room, I'd said, well, I'd like to put this here. Does it make sense? I want the Black Swans. Theoretically, does it make sense within this room? And luckily, the room, with how it was designed, we did have the ability to make those work. But not all rooms are going to be able to do that. So without knowing the constraints of the room, it's very difficult to determine what equipment you can even put in it. And furthermore, the equipment needs to meet the expectation. And I know I'm being kind of a broken record here. But the expectation of the Mad VR Experience Center was bottom of the rabbit hole. So I needed to find equipment that allowed me to do that while cruising. And the Black Swans were one of them. 117 dB sensitive on the tweeters. It's insane. Like, they are able to do reference on just a couple watts. No problem. Having a 64 3 feet from you, just effortless infrasonics. The 21s were chosen because of the output that they had in the kick region to be able to just hammer that frequency range. And they have super light drivers, so their transients are super fast. They hit and they're gone. They're hit and they're gone. So they're able to do all of this. And I was able to determine the equipment that I needed because that was the end result that I wanted. And if I didn't have that goal, how are you able to choose the equipment outside of a frequency response that is needed to get you there? I could have been, if I didn't have that as an end goal and I just said, I want it to be good, or I don't know what SPL I want to get to, I don't know what end result I want, right? If I don't know that, what ends up happening is I buy something, I'm okay with it, and then I'm not okay because I realized that what I wanted, it's not delivering. And of course, part of that is being on the journey long enough to determine what you actually want, right? That's the experience is important. And this is why M-Wave is really important. So for anybody that doesn't know, M-Wave got announced about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. And The VIPs just got launched. I got to finish Tim Miller's theater and put it on today, but the VIPs are available. All the tickets are available. Just found out that Seymour AV is coming. I'm working with Stuart to make sure that get them to come. So we're constantly adding new brands. Kef is coming. Martin Logan is coming. Epson is coming. And this is all within, I mean, the event's still almost 300 days out. So we're going to be full, right? So don't think that there's going to be a bunch of empty rooms. There's not. This is just still very fresh, and we're still nailing down what companies are coming. Ascendo is pretty sure they're coming, but we've got to nail some stuff down with them. So just nailing some stuff down. But things like this is why M-Wave is so important, is because M-Wave gives you the ability to realize what you value. And that's a big reason why I built the Mad VR Experience Center, is because I want to have customers from all over the country, all over the world. I had a customer out from India a couple months ago, so that they can determine what they want. I in no way expect when I sit somebody down for them to go, I want this room. That's not the purpose of it. It's not to sit there and, brag and all of this to have them say, I want this room. That's not the reason. The reason I wanted to go to the end is because I want people to be able to determine what they value, what they can't live without. What their uncompromising things are. Do I absolutely need this level of bass? Do I need this level of vocal clarity? Do I need this brightness? Do I need this noise floor? Do I need this aesthetic? Do I need whatever? I need people to be able to determine their must-haves and can live withouts. And without knowing that, there is not a clear way to determine what you want out of space. So M-Wave, paramount, a pivotal piece of being able to determine this. Going out and experiencing all of this equipment, experiencing, hey, what does multiple subwoofers do? What does something like a Storm or a Trinov do calibration-wise that I'm not going to be able to get out of something else? What do these pieces deliver? What does a super bright, high intrascene contrast projector look like? Can I live without it? Right? Am I able to not have a projector? Can I do a TV? All of these things, when you see them, you can make very quick determinations on, I need that or I can live without it. Doesn't take long. And usually it's the ones that you're conflicted on that are probably more I must have, because you're trying to rationalize with yourself, well, how could I do without this? But in reality, it's always going to sit there. And I realized this about myself for a long time, or after a long time, that when I'm arguing with myself about rationalizing something, that nagging will never go away until I do it. And the problem with the nagging, especially in home theater, and I didn't realize this until I built the Mad VR Experience Center and I reached the bottom, is it pulls you out of immersion. It gets in the way. Those questions, you don't have to reach the bottom of the rabbit hole to be able to do this. You can reach the bottom of your own rabbit hole. But those questions, those could this be betters, are always there to break the AV experience that you're trying to have. It becomes more objective than an emotional experience. And what I view the point of all of these spaces is to have these experiences, to be moved, to be to be taken on these emotionally curated journeys, right? We want to be moved through all of this. The best pieces of content through audio and video that I look back and remember on are the ones that I felt emotionally. And the more I emotionally related to that content, that it pulled me in, the better feeling I have about that content, of how good it was. If I don't emotionally relate to it at all, it's going to be bad. Looking at you, Jurassic Predator. But if I emotionally relate to something at a high level, even animated or kids stuff, Wild Robot's a great example of this. I felt a lot of emotions with that, with kids and all of that, that I really like that piece of content. Some people don't have that emotional relationship to it, and they don't like it as much. So we build these spaces to be moved, to have these experiences, but you don't know what you need to be able to make that happen or to prevent those questions from constantly nagging you until you know. You don't know until you know. And M-Wave, the Mad VR Experience Center, any of your local theater groups or friends or anybody that has theaters, go experience them, because that's what's going to get you to that point. That's what's going to allow you to figure out, what do I like? What do I need in order to be and have these experiences in my space? All right, enough about that journey. And I'll hit this multiple times on the solo experience, because it's, you know, it's important. It's very important. And when we're recording another episode with Peter Aylett, who did the AVS podcast with us last week, I think that aired on Tuesday or last Tuesday. We're doing another one on Subwooferson. I'm sure when I talk to him again, we'll talk about this again, because he is a adamant player in what I just talked about. You start at the foundation and then you build from there. Enough about that. Let's talk about questions. Stitch, you had an angry response to Jurassic Predator, just not a positive one. I don't even know what my empty was my reaction to it. It was bad. It was really bad. Jeffrey Fry says, do M-Wave tickets sell out? I know you previously said they won't increase in price, but I prefer to purchase closer to the events as we have 2 kids, 2 and under. They do not sell out. The VIP tickets absolutely do. There is a set number of seats available, set number of times. The VIP does. The event tickets, they do not. So within reason. I mean, if we hit, for some reason, 750 to 1,000 attendees, yes, I will cap it, because I don't want it to get, but I will provide ample warning before we get to that point. Unless somebody came in and bought 1,000 tickets today, then I can't really do anything. I don't think that's going to happen. So most likely, Jeffrey, no, they're not going to sell out. So don't worry about that. Another question from Jeffrey. Talking about Spinorama data, I am reading the max SPL wrong for Ascendo speakers. For example, 12 passive max SPL only measures up to 200 hertz. Is it assumed they can play louder, higher than that? It usually flattens out after that. And even if it comes down from that, most house curves, if you look at the Harman curve, it's tilted. So it's like this. You need less energy at the higher frequencies in order to have the same perceived SPL or volume. I won't say SPL, I'll say volume. So it can actually tilt down a little bit. And remember that let's pull up the 12. Let's just pull this thing up. Give me a moment and we'll look at this, because I think that's a great question. And you're looking at the 12. Let's see. If I were the 12, where would I be? I'd be here. And let's pull up the Spinorama data. Okay. Window this. Okay. Let's do this. Okay, so here's the Spinorama data, and you're looking at the compression information here, which is here. All right, so it stops at 200 hertz. And it's pretty safe to assume that it's going to keep going or level out a little bit. And remember, this is at 140 dB for one channel. So even if we took this to 2 meters and lost 6 dB, you're at 134 dB at 200 hertz. That's insanely loud for one speaker at 2 meters. So this is more than enough. You don't need to worry about this. The fact that it keeps going up, it's going to probably level out and maybe start to taper back down. And that's okay. So that's the compression data. And then we can go back up and look at the frequency response. And it should give you a pretty good indication of what the response is doing. So here you go. And this right here at about 6K is in something indicative of uh, coaxials. So if we go down and look at, and this is why it's important to look at everything, because if you just look at this, you'll be like, what is happening here? This is bad. But if you didn't look at the entire spinorama and come down here and look, you wouldn't know that an ideal listening angle is actually about 10 degrees on a coaxial, which is this green dotted line. Look how much that smooths out. And this is okay. It tapering off, that's all right. Because as I said with the Harman House curve, it's usually tilted. And mine in my room in the Mad VR Experience Center is absolutely that way. It's tilted because we talk about this all the time that the low frequencies, right? You need a boost to have them perceptually as loud. The high frequencies is the opposite. You need them a little bit lower to be perceptually as loud as you move up. So that's not bad. And our ability to hear up here, meh. I mean, I have what I think is really good hearing for my age, which is about 17,000 hertz. But there's very little content up there. There's some harmonics and things that go on up there. Most of your stuff's going to be in here, in the mids. Most of it's going to be down here. So great question, but I think you're okay. Jeffrey, on a follow-up, so is there a way the compression chart should be used instead of the voltage to figure out SPL? So this is like your voltage that it's getting, if I remember correctly, from the amplifier. So don't necessarily worry about that. This is just showing you the limits of the speaker, wherever that went. You can very easily do this with not this, but with a really good preamp that has enough voltage to push up to that level. But good questions. All right, I'm making sure I don't miss any questions. Okay. Great question, though. All right, so let's turn this off. Turn that off. Drew Arredondo says, is there a way to calculate whether or not I will hear hiss coming from my speakers based on the performance specs of the amp versus the sensitivity of the speakers? So Drew has, I'm going to call you out. You got the Black Swans. The Black Swans, there are very few amplifiers that you're not going to be able to hear hiss, especially if you're sitting right in front of the drivers, like right in the middle of the horn. It's a compromise. As soon as the content start, I mean, I can hear it in my room on the Storm and the Trinov amps. There's no way around it. They're 117 dB sensitive. You hear everything. Ascendo makes an amplifier that I don't believe you hear it, but it's an expensive piece. So, Drew, personally, because I'm walking this walk, I would not worry about this. Once the content starts, you do not hear it. It's not an issue. So I wouldn't worry about it. We can talk about this offline, but I don't think it's something you want to worry about unless it's something that's going to drive you crazy. And if it is, we can talk about it offline and we can see about rectifying it if possible. Majek says, would you agree that most people do not know what they want or need until they are well into this journey? It depends on the person. You can get there quite quickly. I think it depends on what you're exposed to. I say this all the time. You don't know until you know. And you won't get those experiences until you've had that experience. And you can't have that experience unless you're exposed to that particular type of room, equipment, um, that kind of thing. So I guess it depends. For a lot of people, because you don't know what you don't know, I also say this a lot: ignorance is cheap. Because if you don't know that you need to spend money on it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So if you want to know what you value, and maybe you'll be one of those people that don't care about SPL, you don't care about X, Y, or Z, then you're not chasing this stuff. But you won't know that until you experience it. And for me, I don't like having those unanswered questions. I will seek out answers because I don't like living in the unknown. The other part of my personality that creates is it's a double problem is once I have those answers, if I recognize that I have a limitation in this space, I will then proceed immediately to make changes. There is no waiting. It's immediate. I will start research. I will figure out what needs to happen and it will happen. I am not the person that's going to say, well, it would be nice if this happened. I'm not that person. I will do it. I will blaze the trail, even if it hasn't been done. I mean, that's a perfect example of encapsulations of what the Mad VR Experience Center is. A very small room that has an insane amount of firepower that delivers an unsurpassable experience. I mean, it's effectively got two 64s, one in the front, one in the back. 232s equals a 64. 820. I mean, its capability is immense. So that all came from one experience and me recognizing that I'm not going to stop having these thoughts until I do it. And I did it. And that's a long way of me telling you I don't know, Majek. It depends on the person. But the only way to know is to go experience it. An M Wave, the rooms around you, coming out to the Mad VR Experience Center. I got guys coming out tomorrow and I'm putting up for the night. So it doesn't have to be expensive. Cost you a plane ticket, right? To come out, see me, and experience things. See what you want, see what you value, and then be able to make those determinations in your own setup. William Kramer says maybe you should do a second setup in your theater that is a lean in price to still meet a level 4. Your theater doesn't require most of the equipment in there to hit the levels that you're needed. You might be surprised. So, yeah, I mean, potentially. But for the low frequencies, especially, man, it takes a lot of horsepower to be able to get to the levels of low infrasonic that is happening in that room. An immense amount of surface area and power to be able to deliver that. Now, if you're talking about everything else, yeah, and I've thought about it. It's something I would like to do. I would like to put something like the 12s, not the 12 Pro BEs, just the 12s up there with the Black Swans and be able to showcase them. It's absolutely something that is on the map for that space. For sure. So, William, good thought. That was in the original concept for this room and was one reason why I chose Officina was because of the ability to move things, the ability to change things. I mean, the speakers behind all the acoustic panels, the 12 Pro BEs are literally sitting on cinder blocks. There's not some complicated mounting system. It's cinder blocks sitting on rubber because it's inert. They're heavy. I'm not overthinking anything. It's just what would work in this situation. Don't overthink it. Overthinking things and making things unduly complicated is a recipe for failure. Cinder blocks are great with rubber to stop things from moving around. They work fantastic. But that is a great point. We answered that question for Jeffrey. The audio keeps cracking. I hope not. Is it still cracking, Classy? Let me know. Stitch says, he's speaking truth. Learning what you like from different theaters allows you to pick and choose what parts of the system you want to use in your own room and leave out the things you don't care about. That exactly. Exactly. Because then you know. And Tim has been on this journey for a long time with the Glacial Pace Theater, and he's going to showcase it at M-Wave. And I think that's really important because he's walked this. He's been to a lot of spaces before he even started down this pathway. And he is a perfect living embodiment of this and being able to determine what you value, what you can live without, what your must haves are. And he's doing it. So great words of wisdom there, Tim. Really appreciate that. But I'm glad you're going to be on the M-Wave tour. And I think people should see your space. STL Sports Audio Fan, input from experience in the various rooms of the KC Crawl was the best input I've got. It allowed me to experience higher level stuff and figure out the important gaps I want to fill. That's right. How do you know how to fill them, or even if those gaps exist, unless you experience it? Derek, have you already announced volunteer opportunities? I have not yet. And Drew Arredondo, he was in chat earlier, is actually going to help me out with that. We're going to make an announcement probably next week on AVS Forum, and I'll include an email address. And Drew's going to head up the volunteer stuff. He was pivotal in registration last year. Him and his wife helped immensely at M-Wave 2024. So it's going to be great to have him back at M-Wave 2026 to be able to head that up. But we have not announced that yet. Let's see. Martin Grayling. Hey, Ryan, is the Kaleidoscape 12 to 24 terabyte much more noisy than the 8 to 8 terabyte server fan noise? It's hit or miss. Some of them are more noisy. The new one is SSD, so I actually think it's nearly silent. But if you're comparing the 1224 to the 8, I mean, in comparison, relatively, yes, they are significantly more noisy. I don't really think about this because my 48's in a totally different room. I've never had a problem with it, but again, they've always been in another room, so I've never really thought about it. The cool thing about them, though, is if you have a player and you have a Terra, is the Terra doesn't have to live in your theater. You could put it in a closet. It just has to be on the network. The player in the Terra communicate over Ethernet, RJ45. So they don't have to be next to each other. It's just a network connection. So you can have them in other places in the house. Like I have a player up in the living room and my Terra's downstairs. And it works great. No issues. So if the server's too loud, just don't put it in your room. Drew, wasn't that your wife last year? I swear your wife was there, but I also have a terrible memory. So I'm probably wrong and I'm digging myself a hole. So I'll stop. It does crack time to time. I'll have to restart my computer. Something must be going on with the audio. I had some crackling in my output, but I didn't realize it was cracking in the voice. So sorry about that. MKH Audio, how much does the HT look important versus technical? So aesthetic, I'm only allowed to buy 2 main recliners and mix with the old recliner due to my wife being against spending more. Enough feel sad, but no option. How much does the home theater look important versus technical? I think aesthetic is more important than people give it credit for. If you don't like the way something looks and the room is not approachable and the room is not nice to be in, subconsciously, I feel like you're not going to use it as much. So aesthetic, usability are just as important as capability. All right. So Drew, correct me. It wasn't his wife. I was totally mistaken. I apologize about that. But back to the question. I think it's more important than people think. So I would consider it. Absolutely. I personally don't like the aesthetic of theater chairs or recliners. That's my personal choice. I like couches. So I've made a choice. I feel like couches are more cozy for my wife and I when we're watching something. For the kids, they're more flexible. And that's the direction I've gone. So I think they're It's more important than people give it credit for. All right. Well, that is the end. I've made Drew upset by saying his wife was there and she was not. So I'm just going to end it and run away. But we've got another stream. The stream tomorrow is about what we talked about today, design for the room. So we'll just rehash that tomorrow, or I may change the topic. We'll have to see, because I went on a tangent today. We'll find out. I got to think about topics for tomorrow, I guess, while I'm doing things today. But thanks for joining me. Oh, Scott and his wife. That's probably true. I'm terrible. My memory's awful. But thank you for the correction, Derek. It was probably Scott and his wife. You are probably absolutely right. So, Drew, apologies for the misremembering, but I did appreciate you in the things that you've done for M-Waves in the past. But if anybody has questions about M-Wave, has questions about equipment, if you want to see the LS12000s or the Storms that are available and they can ship, and I could set up calibrations and stuff for them immediately, let me know. We also needed to discuss out-the-door pricing, because I will not talk pricing on the stream. Feel free to reach out using the QR code in the corner, and we can see about getting you taken care of. And it does not just go for that equipment. It goes for any equipment on ascendav.net/partners. I'm happy to help in any way that I can to see if I can assist you on your journey. And I will treat you the way that I would want to be treated, which is a big reason why I became a dealer. So I will see you guys tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Central for another stream. Not sure if we're going to talk more about the room or if it's going to be about something else, but enjoy your home theater journeys. Think about questions. If you've got anything that you want to talk about tomorrow, I'm happy to answer them. And if you have any topic suggestions that maybe we can use for tomorrow, drop them in the comments. We can see about getting that answered for you. But until next time, again,